Do you ever feel overwhelmed when you look at a jazz standard chart? Or maybe when you're playing over the changes of a song, you just feel there's pockets of it where you can't play convincingly over it, or you really don't know what to do there. Well, in this vlog, I'd like to talk about some practice strategies you can employ to tackle those problem points in your practice. As a jazz guitarist, when you're in the practice room and you're working through a standard, it's very easy to come across sections of songs or chord changes which flummox you, which you don't get, you don't understand how to play over, you don't understand what's going on, and it can be incredibly frustrating in terms of building up to playing fluently over a standard. We all have those songs we play where there's little bits when we're like, ooh, I think I'll just fall back on tried and tested methods here, and you feel like you can be less creative because you don't feel as sure as what's going on and what you can do over that section. Well, when I'm faced with this situation, I like to do what's called portion the changes, and that is very simply taking out the part that's giving you trouble and isolating those chord changes and practicing over that section. So instead of playing through the entire form and feeling like you're getting nowhere, or still having that section which is just a bit of a bumpy road, then by taking out this section, what you can do is gain confidence with it and then put it back in, reinstate it, and hopefully things will then all come back to a level playing field in terms of how confident you feel about playing over the whole form. Now, I know you're probably thinking this is a really obvious, easy solution, but quite often when we're presented with problems, we ignore the obvious, easy answer and toil away and get nowhere. And I think this solution is really simple and effective. I also think it's human nature to want to play through the whole thing, and it's not efficient, it's not effective. Now, at what points in songs are you likely to encounter difficulty? Well, for me personally, it will either be shifts in harmony, so odd movements, unexpected movements, where you're taken away from the key center and you've got to go somewhere else with your harmony. So it could be things like temporary key changes, chords out of key, or it could just be the speed of the changes which are just bypassing you and making it difficult for you to play over, and sort of your speed of thought can't cope with the speed at which the changes are happening. Let's imagine we're having trouble playing over the start of There Will Never Be Another You. So that starts in E flat major, then does a minor 2-5-1 to the relative minor of C minor 7. I remember when I first came across this tune myself, I definitely had trouble with this bit. For whatever reason, minor 2-5-1s always feel a little bit harder, particularly when you're sort of new to playing jazz. And what I would do is I would portion off that section of the changes, draw up the tempo right down, ignore the speed that people are typically playing at because we can work up to that. And I would just loop the problem section. So I've got my RC3 down here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop the changes really slowly, which is going to give you more time to think. So 1, 2, 3, 4, so... After the second bar of C minor 7, I'm going to leave a blank bar. We'll talk about that in a second. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the reason I left that blank bar, that's my reset moment. That's my, what shall I try over the next time, right? I tried arpeggios that time, I tried creating melodies, I tried finding chord tones, whatever it might be, but it's just that, right, I'm going again, what should I do this time? There it goes. Just find chord tones to start with. However it might be, it might be playing phrases over at licks, but the looper is great for that kind of practice. Just keep things slow, portion it off, give you that reset moment to think about what you're going to try on your next run through. I find that sort of reset moment, that bar, empty bar, just helpful, makes it less sort of overwhelming. With it just continually going on, gives you that sort of reset time. If you don't have a looper, or that's still a step too far, you could just simply play in free time. So play in free time, but just think about the chord changes as you're doing, so you're not sort of then stuck to a beat in which is forcing you to think at a certain speed. So we have that problem area in There Will Never Be Another You. So we simply loop it or play in free time and just isolate that section. We gain confidence with that. Once you feel comfortable with being able to follow the changes and create melodies over them, and you're happy with what you're doing, then try and piece it back in and play over the whole form. Again, keeping tempo slow. On YouTube you have the facility to slow down things, so you can go to the settings section and slow it down to 75% or even 50%. Yes, it does create a slightly odd sound, but it's bearable, you can get used to it, and then you could build it back up to 100%. Let's say a problem's slightly different. Yes, it's still the chord changes, but really it's the speed of the changes which are giving you difficulty. We're still going to portion things off, but we're going to try something a little bit different. And when I mean speed of the changes, I'm not talking about the tempo of the song. I'm talking about how quickly the chords change in terms of, you know, you could have a song where you have the same chord for 2 bars, and then, or you can have 4 bars with a chord in each bar, or even 2 chords per bar or more. So I'm talking more about how many chords there are in each bar and how that can challenge you in terms of thinking. Let's take the first 2 bars of Duke Ellington's ballad In a Sentimental Mood, one of my absolute favourites. Django's version, or Ellington with Coltrane's version is, it's brilliant. Anyway, let's take the first 2 bars. There's 4 chords in 2 bars, so 2 chords per bar. What I do here is, rather than just looping that and going, strumming away slowly and then playing over the top of it, or playing in free time, what I would do is actually extend the length of each chord. So just kind of ignore the way Duke Ellington wrote it temporarily, but still follow his order. So instead of going, 2 beats D minor, 2 beats D minor major 7, 2 beats D minor 7, and so forth, what I would do is do a whole bar, or even longer on each chord. So do a whole bar of the first chord, a whole bar of the second chord, and so forth. You could even extend it to a longer, 2 bars per chord. Why? Well, that way you're going to have so much more time to think, so much more time to explore ideas on the fretboard, whether it be finding the chord tones, whether it be finding an appropriate scale, or playing a melody over that chord. More time to think, more time to find the harmony that the chord is asking for, and what ideas you want to create over it, and how you're going to link between those chords. So let me demonstrate this. In that Duke Ellington song, it goes like this. So to practice over, what you could do is extend that to a bar on each chord. So instead of 2 beats on each one, a whole bar. So going like that. This way you've got more time to explore the harmony and more time to think about what you're going to play next, because that's the crux of playing decent guitar. It all comes down to playing what you're playing whilst thinking about what you're going to do next. There's so many things happening on different levels, and I think it comes down to, how well you can think in the moment. And one way we can help you with that, or help ourselves with that, is by doing this. Extend the length of the chords. More thinking time will hopefully lead to better results in the short term and long term. One of the hardest things about playing jazz and soloing is saying something interesting over the chord you're currently playing over whilst thinking about where you're going next. The great improvisers are very much targeting certain notes, and they've got it in their ear, their head, where it's going, but they're still playing what they're playing whilst thinking about what's coming next. So slowing things down, doing things out of tempo, or extending the length of the chords, portioning off bits of songs which give you trouble, that's a great way to practice. My final method for portioning out the changes is actually just take one portion, and that one portion is one chord. I'd refer to this as static chord practice. So let's say minor 7 flat 5 chords, or whatever chord type it might be. There might be a certain chord type where you don't feel confident. When it comes up, that you're just spewing out your same old drivel over it, and you're dissatisfied with what you're doing, and it's a continual, every time that chord crops up, it's that moment of managed to negotiate that one today, but blagged it with some licks or whatever it might be. When you're playing kind of falls into blagging over certain bits, or it just plain goes wrong. So when it comes to those sort of one chord type which is giving you difficulty, static chord practice, where either you could just loop that one chord going at a slow tempo, or I like to use the Electro Harmonics freeze pedal, where you can play the chord and it freezes and sustains the sound of the chord with a bit of modulation, so it sounds a little bit psychedelic if you like, but it's quite a fun way to practice. Sort of gives a sort of droning effect. And then what I like to do is find the chord tones, find the arpeggio subs over it, find the scales, try and create melodies over it. And I haven't got that problem of there's a chord coming, there's a chord in the next bar, or there's a chord on the next beat. It's just about, right, let's just explore what I can do over this chord type. Let's try and say something interesting over it, so that next time it comes up in a song, I'm able to say something over it and not just sort of bypass it or blag my way through it. So the freeze goes like this. I can play a chord and it can sustain it I can then, you know, practice over the top. This is a D minor 7. Practice, you know, licks, scales, arpeggios, whatever you might want to do over it, but it will just keep going forever. Very useful. I will warn you, if you get into this static chord practice, it's almost like you get into sort of like a trance-like state where before now I've played over the one chord for an hour and not even realised the time has gone. So it's quite enjoyable, it's quite fun. I think is a really sensible practice approach. So let me know what you think of these tips. So just to recap, you know, we're looking at portioning off the changes, and whether that be taking out small sections and working them in isolation, slowing down the tempo using a looper, or working in free time, bringing tempo right down, sometimes extending how long you play on each chord. So if it was going, you know, 2 chords per measure, give yourself a whole bar on each chord or even longer. So extend the progression to give you more time to explore it. It all comes down to thinking time, and things have to be put deep into your unconscious in order for you to be able to play them fluently in a soloing context. So I think this kind of practice where you really dig down deep will have big payoffs and mean that those pockets of songs will be less problematic. But as I said near the start of the video, I think it's human nature to play through the entire form, and that sometimes we forget the need to go down to the micro sort of bits and really focus in and get confident with that. And remembering that, you know, things like that, opening 4 bars to There Will Never Be Another You, that happens in many other standards. So, you know, take, for instance, good example, Georgia does it in the first bits of Georgia on My Mind. So if you can crack it with There Will Never Be Another You, it will help you play over Georgia. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time on my channel, my name's Andy and I do jazz guitar lessons every Wednesday and Saturday. I also have a website called jazzguitarwithandy.com where I've got resources from my videos, as well as video lessons available for purchase and information on online lessons with myself. But I hope you're doing well. Please consider subscribing if you've enjoyed today. Any questions, any comments, leave them below and I'll see you next time. See you later.